Welcome back to Learn VLSI Easy. Today, we begin our deep dive into Day 2, the CMOS inverter. This simple circuit is the absolute foundation of all digital logic, forming the basis for every processor, memory chip, and digital system in existence. It consists of a PMOS transistor on top, connected to the VDD power supply, and an NMOS transistor on the bottom, connected to ground. The beauty of this complementary arrangement is how the two transistors take turns conducting. When the input is driven high, to a logic 1, the NMOS transistor turns on strongly, pulling the output down to 0. Simultaneously, the PMOS turns off, completely severing the path to the power supply. Conversely, when the input is low, the PMOS turns on and pulls the output to VDD, while the NMOS is off. Because only one transistor is ever fully conducting in steady state, a true CMOS inverter draws practically zero static power. This breakthrough is what allowed the semiconductor industry to scale to billions of transistors without melting the chip. To truly understand how an inverter behaves, we must look at its voltage transfer characteristic, or VTC. This curve maps exactly how the output voltage responds as we slowly sweep the input voltage from 0 to VDD. At the extremes, the output is solidly pinned to either the power rail or ground. But as the input crosses the switching threshold, typically around half of VDD, both the NMOS and PMOS transistors enter their saturation regions. In this middle transition region, the circuit acts as a high-gain analog amplifier. The VTC curve drops incredibly sharply. The steepness of this slope defines the voltage gain of the inverter. Why does a digital gate need high gain? Because a steep transition is what allows the inverter to restore weakened, noisy signals back to clean, crisp logic levels. The switching threshold itself can be precisely tuned by adjusting the relative widths of the PMOS and NMOS devices. In a real-world integrated circuit, signals are never perfect. They suffer from crosstalk, power supply fluctuations, and electromagnetic interference. Noise margins define exactly how much electrical chaos a logic gate can tolerate before it misinterprets a 0 as a 1, or a 1 as a 0. We quantify this by finding the 2 points on the VTC curve where the slope is exactly -1. These unity gain points define VIL, the maximum valid low input, and VIH, the minimum valid high input. The difference between what the previous gate outputs and what the current gate accepts forms the low and high noise margins. By carefully sizing our transistors to center the VTC, we can make these margins symmetrical, thereby maximizing the overall noise immunity of the system. This robustness is a key reason why CMOS dominated older logic families. Speed is everything in digital design, and propagation delay is the ultimate metric of performance. It measures the time it takes for a change at the input to reliably reflect at the output. Specifically, we measure from the 50% point of the input voltage waveform to the 50% point of the output voltage waveform. When the input falls and the output goes from low to high, the PMOS transistor acts as a current source, charging up the total parasitic load capacitance at the output node. This gives us the low to high delay, TPLH. When the input rises, the NMOS discharges that same capacitance to ground, giving us the high to low delay, TPHL. The fundamental formula for delay depends directly on the load capacitance and inversely on the power supply voltage and transistor drive strength. Minimizing capacitance and maximizing drive current are the endless battles of a VLSI engineer. Managing power dissipation is arguably the hardest challenge in modern chip design. In a CMOS inverter, power comes from three distinct sources. Static power is the leakage current that constantly drips through the transistors, even when they are supposedly turned off. Short circuit power occurs during the brief, fleeting moment when the input is transitioning, causing both the PMOS and NMOS to be partially on, creating a direct path from VDD to ground. However, when the chip is active, the most dominant component is usually dynamic power. This is the energy expended to physically charge and discharge the parasitic capacitors on the wires and transistor gates. The formula is alpha times C times VDD squared times the clock frequency. Because the supply voltage, VDD, is squared in this equation, aggressively lowering the voltage is the most powerful weapon we have to reduce power consumption. To achieve equal rise and fall times, and thereby symmetrical noise margins, we must carefully balance the resistance of the PMOS and NMOS transistors. This introduces a fundamental physical challenge. The charge carriers in a PMOS transistor are holes, which have significantly lower mobility than the electrons used in an NMOS transistor. Because of this sluggish mobility, a PMOS transistor of the exact same size will be much weaker and slower than its NMOS counterpart. To compensate for this physics limitation, we must artificially size up the PMOS. We typically make the PMOS width about 2 to 3 times larger than the NMOS width. This ratio of widths is known as the beta ratio. Proper beta ratio sizing ensures that the inverter pulls up to VDD just as forcefully as it pulls down to ground, keeping timing predictable across the chip. Let's look closer at short-circuit power, a phenomenon that becomes severe if your circuit is poorly designed. Imagine an input signal that is transitioning very slowly from 0 to VDD. As it passes through the middle voltages, it exceeds the threshold voltage of the NMOS while remaining far enough below VDD to exceed the threshold of the PMOS. For a brief window, both transistors are simultaneously conducting. This creates a highly undesirable, direct short-circuit path from the power supply straight to ground, bypassing the load capacitance entirely. This wasted current does zero useful work. If your input signal has a very slow slew rate, meaning it takes a long time to rise or fall, this short-circuit window stays open longer, burning massive amounts of power. This is exactly why VLSI engineers impose strict rules on maximum transition times, inserting repeater buffers on long wires to keep the signal edges sharp and crisp. We previously stated that CMOS draws zero static power. While this was true in the 1990s, it is completely false today. As we scale transistors down to nanometer dimensions, we are forced to scale down the threshold voltage as well to maintain performance. But the turn-off behavior of a MOSFET is not an abrupt cliff. It follows an exponential curve in what is called the subthreshold region. Even when the gate voltage is zero, thermal energy allows some electrons to quantum-mechanically slip through the potential barrier of the channel. This is subthreshold leakage. While the leakage of a single transistor might be measured in picoamps, modern processors contain billions of them. These tiny drips add up to amps of wasted current, turning static leakage into one of the primary sources of heat in mobile devices, draining your phone's battery even when the screen is off. To understand the VTC's high gain, we must examine channel length modulation. In ideal textbook models, once a transistor enters saturation, its drain current remains perfectly constant regardless of how much higher the drain voltage goes. However, in reality, as you increase the drain voltage, the depletion region around the drain expands. This physically encroaches upon the channel, pushing the pinch-off point closer to the source. The effective length of the channel actually becomes shorter. A shorter channel means less resistance, which causes the drain current to slightly increase. This phenomenon is called channel length modulation. Because the current isn't perfectly flat, the transistor has a finite output resistance. This finite resistance is what ultimately limits the maximum voltage gain of our CMOS inverter when both devices are in saturation. It is a crucial secondary effect that analog and mixed signal designers must always account for. As transistors shrink to deeply scaled nanometer nodes, a new physical limit emerges: velocity saturation. In older, long-channel devices, if you doubled the electric field pushing the electrons move twice as fast. Their drift velocity was linearly proportional to the electric field. But physics has a speed limit. When the electric field becomes incredibly strong, which happens easily across a microscopic 5-nanometer channel, the electrons collide with the silicon crystal lattice so violently and frequently that they cannot accelerate any further. They hit a saturated maximum velocity, typically around 10 to the 7th centimeters per second. Because the electrons can't move any faster, increasing the gate voltage yields diminishing returns in current. Velocity saturation forces modern transistors to behave more linearly rather than quadratically, completely altering the equations we use to model delay. Another severe short-channel effect is Dibble, or drain-induced barrier lowering. In a well-behaved transistor, the gate has absolute authority over the channel, creating a tall potential energy barrier that blocks electron flow when turned off. But as the source and drain get microscopically close to each other, the high voltage on the drain starts to exert its own electrostatic influence over the channel. The drain's electric field reaches across and literally pulls down the potential barrier that the gate was trying to hold up. By artificially lowering this barrier, Dibble effectively reduces the threshold voltage of the transistor. This means a short-channel transistor will leak significantly more current when the drain voltage is high. To fight Dibble, foundries have evolved from planar transistors to FinFETs and now gate-all-around nanosheets, wrapping the gate completely around the channel to regain electrostatic control. When we draw a logic gate on a whiteboard, we draw wires. But in silicon, every structure is a capacitor in disguise. The gate of the MOSFET is physically separated from the channel by a thin layer of silicon dioxide, forming the intrinsic gate capacitance. But that's not all. The gate physically overlaps the source and drain diffusion slightly, creating overlap capacitance. Furthermore, the heavily doped source and drain regions sit inside an oppositely doped well, creating a massive reverse-biased p-n junction. This forms the diffusion, or junction capacitance. When our CMOS inverter switches, it isn't just driving the gate of the next transistor, it is forcefully dumping charge into all of these parasitic capacitors. Accurately modeling these invisible capacitance is the entire foundation of static timing analysis. Of all the parasitic capacitors, the gate-to-drain overlap capacitance is uniquely troublesome because of the Miller effect. Imagine an inverter transitioning from high to low. The input voltage at the gate is rising by VDD, while the output voltage at the drain is falling by VDD. This means the voltage difference across the gate-to-drain capacitor is changing by twice VDD. Because the capacitor experiences double the voltage swing, it demands double the charge from the driving circuit. To the circuit driving the inverter, this small overlap capacitor appears effectively multiplied by a factor of 2, or even more depending on the gain. This dynamic multiplication of capacitance during a switching event significantly degrades the speed of the circuit and causes a nasty phenomenon known as overshoot, making the Miller capacitance a critical enemy of high-speed design. A schematic is just an abstraction. The physical reality of the CMOS inverter is a complex, multi-layer topographical map known as the layout. At the very bottom, we implant N-type and P-type wells into the silicon substrate. We then grow active diffusion regions for the sources and drains. Across these regions, we pattern lines of polysilicon to form the gates. Wherever poly crosses active diffusion, a transistor is born. Finally, we drop tungsten contacts down to the silicon and use layers of copper routing, like metal 1, to wire the VDD, ground, input, and output together. Creating this layout is bound by hundreds of strict geometric design rules dictated by the limitations of photolithography. Every nanometer of spacing, width, and enclosure is meticulously calculated to ensure the chip can actually be manufactured without short-circuiting. The physical proximity of NVELs and PVELs in CMOS introduces a catastrophic, hidden danger known as latch-up. Because of how the doped regions sit next to each other, they unintentionally form parasitic NPN and PNP bipolar transistors. These bipolar transistors are cross-coupled, forming a deadly feedback loop that acts exactly like a thyristor. Under normal conditions, these parasitic devices are completely off. But a sudden voltage spike, radiation strike, or electrostatic discharge can inject enough stray current to trigger the feedback loop. Once triggered, the thyristor snaps on, creating a massive, unstoppable short circuit between VDD and ground. The chip will literally melt itself in milliseconds unless the power is instantly cut. Latch-up is the nightmare scenario of every physical designer. To prevent the catastrophic destruction of latch-up, we must suppress the parasitic bipolar transistors. We do this by aggressively tying the wells to firm voltage levels. We use highly doped N+ regions to explicitly tie the N well directly to VDD, and highly doped P+ regions to tie the P substrate directly to ground. These are called body ties or tap cells. In high-risk circuits like input-output pads, we go even further. We encircle the entire transistor with continuous, glowing perimeters of these body ties, forming what are called guard rings. These guard rings act as a robust electrical moat. They intercept and safely absorb any stray injected currents, ensuring the parasitic thyristor never sees enough voltage drop to turn on. It costs precious silicon area, but it is the absolute price of a reliable chip. This concludes day 2. You now understand the CMOS inverter from quantum leakage to physical layout. Follow Learn VLSI Easy and I'll see you tomorrow.